Hello, everyone. I'm Gabe Moynagh. I'm the co-founder of VikingCloud. I'm also the general manager of our acquiring business division. So we partner with acquiring banks, payment processors, ISOs, and we help our clients to bring PCI compliance to their small, simple merchants. Lovely to be here. Thank you.
I was about to say good morning. I looked at my watch. I guess I should say good afternoon. My name's Kevin Pierce. I'm the president and chief operating officer for VikingCloud. And I have the honor of working with about 1,000 of our professionals globally. And those professionals, over the past 18 months or so, we've been working on this risk-directed pathway that we're going to talk about today and discuss that with you. So Gabe, why don't you just get us started on the agenda?
Yep. So today is not a presentation about the past, but we are going to talk a little bit about the past because it's relevant to the future. Simple merchants are facing a lot of change. And it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, because of biometrics, tokenization, they're handling a lot less raw PAN, which is good. On the other, because of the rise of alternative payment rails, buy now, pay later, account-to-account payments, wallets, there's just a whole lot of new ways that they can cut themselves. The good news is this community has a really good track record of evolving, and I think we can learn from the past to make life easier for these simple merchants in the future.
So then we're going to pick up and we're going to talk specifically about risk-directed security, what it is and the value of that of a solution of that type. And then we have some closing thoughts on and industry implications. So for us to get started, since we're discussing today, one of the items is where the industry is moving, I wanted to ground us on a couple of thoughts. And the one is on the left side here. The best way to predict the future is to invent it. And this was a quote by a gentleman, Alan Kay. Alan was one of the forefathers of personalized computing. He was a big advocate for computing on a personal basis. And this concept of personalization is going to be important. So listen for it today as we go through our discussions. But also, on the other side is a very wise quote, and it's, but to invent wisely, we must first understand what came before. My esteemed colleague, Gabe Moynagh,
I can't believe you actually listened to me.
So it's one of the few times I listened to Gabe. But it is important, though, if we're going to think about the future, we need to also consider the past. So on that note, Gabe, tell us a little more about the history of PCI.
Yeah, so like many good stories, the PCI DSS story begins during a storm. So back in the 90s, it seems that card data was just lying around everywhere, and fraud losses were ballooning into the hundreds of millions of dollars. The brands responded; they created their own program, but that created this sort of like overlap of a patchwork of different requirements. It was a little confusing. But then, in 2004, something truly brilliant happened. The brands came together. They created one unifying standard, version 1.0, 1.1, the formation of the council. Just really, really important chapters in the history of PCI DSS. To me, though, like looking back, I think what's really striking is that unity, it didn't just create a standard for then. It created this community, which has allowed us to evolve, and the standard has evolved multiple times in that time frame, and they've done so in a pretty pragmatic way. If you look at like 4.0, they created future data requirements. They gave us the time to plan, to budget for these changes, while at the same time still telling us specifically where the industry was going, where the standard was going. So I think, I'm sure we could all nitpick. This wasn't as rosy a story as I'm making it out to be, but the truth is there is nothing like this data security community in any other industry vertical. So we're at the end of this timeline. I want to apologize to the council for 20 years of blood, sweat, and tears. I said it in 20 sentences. But one of the brands has now put forward a new approach, a risk-directed approach. We really like it. We want to talk a bit more about it. Before that, I want to talk a bit about PAN a little bit more. So in 2004, when the standard was released, page 1, PAN is a defining factor. PCI DSS is about protecting the PAN, and that made a ton of sense at the time. Hackers loved stealing card numbers. And it really, so protecting the PAN was the best way to stop breaches, and it really worked. Over the years, these controls dramatically reduced the number of breaches, especially in level 1 and 2 organizations. At the same time, the industry has been trying to remove PAN from the ecosystem entirely, and it's done a really good job of that. So now, today, merchants of all sizes, but particularly simple merchants, small merchants, are handling less and less and less PAN, which raises an interesting question. If PAN is disappearing from a simple merchant, for all intents and purposes, what does that do for the PCI standard for simple merchants? And so, I think, when we put this presentation together at the start, I thought this was a bigger hot take than I do now, because obviously in Dallas and here again yesterday, the council are already planning and evolving for this change. So I think that's, from a PAN perspective, we got to start thinking, what are we going to do? Please click on.
There you go.
So I think that we're in a really good place. We have, as an industry, we have a unified global standard. We have a lot of experience, iterating and evolving that standard. We already distinguish between small merchants and complex merchants, large merchants, small merchants. And we've got a really good ecosystem, the Gear, the board of advisors, a really good community for taking and discussing feedback. So we're in a really good place. But there is one paradox, I think, which is, PAN disappearing from small merchants is not resulting in more merchants achieving PCI DSS compliance. PAN fading from small businesses, it's not preventing the hundreds of millions of dollars small merchants pay every year in fines. And PAN fading from small businesses, for reasons Kevin will discuss more, it's not going to be a silver bullet for small business security. So Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what is risk-directed security?
Certainly. Thank you, Gabe. So, I mentioned that our team has spent a lot of time over the past couple of years thinking through this solution. And one of the things we always do is we talk to our customers. And as we've talked to our customers and done research, there are a couple of points that are coming forward pretty soundly. One is that these simple merchants are still the #1 target for cyber criminals. And it's basically because their defenses are so weak. And when we probed and we said, well, what are you doing for your defenses? Many say, well, I have a friend who helps me, I have a family member who comes over, they may help something, or we just do nothing. And they're doing these things not because they don't want to be secure. They want to be secure. They just don't have the tools and the knowledge that they need in order to get the security that they need. And the effects of lack of security can be devastating. And we see stats like we're showing on the screen here often, and you see them too. Business downtime occurs. You lose customers when you can't serve them. Ultimately, you can lose revenue. But one of the key things we like to do versus looking at the stats is actually talking to customers. So here's just one case study. We have numerous over the past years that we've gone through. And this is a small veterinary clinic. It's in the United States, in the state of South Carolina. And they're one of our customers, and we called them up. And we said, we knew that they had some type of cyber event, and we asked them what happened. And they said, well, we're PCI compliant. We do our SAQ every year. We try to do what we think we should do. But all of a sudden, one day, we come in, and our computers, all of our systems go down, and we get this message, you need to pay us $10,000 in Bitcoin in order to get access to your systems again. Now, $10,000 is a lot of money for a simple merchant. But it's more than the money. When this customer was down, or when this company was down, they couldn't serve their customers. They couldn't take care of all of the animals that they're supposed to be taking care of. All their systems were not available. So when we think of risk-directed security, an important point that I want to leave us with and us to think about is we're not talking about just the statistics. We're talking about enhancing the protection for real businesses and real people just like this. And if we're discussing and wanting to discuss what cybersecurity solutions we should evolve and use for small merchants, and that's exactly what Gabe and I are discussing today, then the industry must evolve. And the good news is that the tools and the platforms that are needed for this evolution are already in place. And if we consider just simply the protections that have been afforded to the payment card data and the payment industry, as Gabe was mentioning earlier, the industry's done a phenomenal job. However, we're living today in a world of explosive change. Payment rails, if you think about it, they're ever expanding. And AI is actually changing the way that threat actors work. They're creating new attack vectors, and they're doing it at a speed that we've never seen before. And we have multiple, even though we're talking about simple merchants today, we have multiple enterprise clients. And when we talk to our enterprise clients who have millions of dollars in R&D and spending, they're having a tough time keeping up in this new environment. So when we think of simple merchants, what did they do? How do they survive? And actually more than survive, how do they thrive in an environment where the attacks are broader, more sophisticated, and occurring at a faster pace than we've ever seen? So we think, and we do have definite ideas on this, but one of the points that we wanted to make and be clear about is that compliance and compliance frameworks are essential. They're a foundation, and on that foundation, we're able to build and deliver solutions that address the unique attack surfaces and provides personalized protection for these simple merchants. And risk-directed security and solutions similar are ones that we think head in this correct direction. So Gabe, where do we go as an industry from here?
Yeah, so I think we're at an inflection point. So millions of small businesses today don't complete the SAQ on the various portals that they're on, and they obviously end up paying fines. And nobody in the industry likes that. It was we did the best of what we had. But I think with new technology today, it's so much easier to deliver a better security solution and to automate that. So I think what we have to do as an industry is, like, merchants are already used to paying an amount of money. Use that as their budget for security. Turn that from a penalty revenue into security revenue, and give them the tools that they need to actually. So rather than asking them questions on an SAQ or on the portal, give them security to make those questions easier to answer. So I think that's one idea I think we should do. Anyway, will you talk a little bit more about risk-directed security?
So definitely. So let's take a couple of moments. We've mentioned this concept of risk-directed security. So what is it really? And when we think of it, it's solutions that combine security tools, threat intelligence, and an exceptional risk assessment functionality. And normally when we're presenting, when I'm presenting, we don't go through the bullet points, but I think just pause a minute here and let me talk through each of these points is going to be effective and relaying what we believe solutions of this type do. So one is, as we say, it's a tailored risk profile. It's a tailored analysis, both for e-commerce and for brick-and-mortar merchants. They have unique attack surfaces, and solutions need to account for those unique attack surfaces. There's an assessment of risk. We normally think of internal and external risk, but there's also a third component, digital risk, that I'll get to in a moment that's important. So this is, when we talk about this solution, it's more than an external vulnerability scan or a passive scan of websites. It's substantial in what it's doing. It's site-specific. So threats are individual down to the site level for merchants, for these simple merchants, and therefore solutions have to address threats at that site level. They're continuous. So the concept of let me do an SAQ or let me do something once a year or a scan once a quarter, that's not going to do it in this new world. This needs to be continuous, daily, hourly, by the minute. And when we think of expanded asset protection, so what I mean by assets, when we're thinking of security for simple merchants, I always think of assets being, and they are, endpoints and cloud and database. But simple merchants have, many times, they're sole proprietors, and their personal identities are inextricably linked to their companies. So the concept of protecting their digital risk and their digital assets gives those simple merchants a greater amount of security. And the solutions must be integrated. So they have to assess risk, be prescriptive in what the merchant should do, and provide the tools all in an integrated platform that's easy for these simple merchants to use. So there's three concepts as we think of a go forward and as we develop these types of solutions that we want to leave you with for risk-directed security. One is they should be comprehensive. So attack surfaces, as we mentioned earlier, are expanding, they're expanded rapidly. A solution has to be comprehensive and able to adapt to those changing attack surfaces. They must be coordinated, and by what I mean by coordinated is solutions can't work in isolation. So to give you a great example, When a merchant is using an endpoint solution, an endpoint detection solution, it needs the telemetry and the information that's coming from that solution needs to be shared and correlated with file integrity monitoring or other solutions. We luckily have a red teaming practice, and when we go into clients and we're doing our red teaming exercises, we're able to go in and when they pay us to say, where are your threats, when we see someone who's using a marketplace of our hodgepodge of tools and the tools aren't talking to each other and coordinated, it's going to be easy not only once we get in, and we always get in, to do lateral movement and to be able to exploit, it's easier. So I think I'd leave you with this, and that solutions that are working in isolation, where there's no correlation, that always leads to opportunity for exploitation. But solutions that work in coordination, they're going to reduce risk. And then finally, customization. They need to be customized. So we all hear this phrase, one size fits all. We hear it in clothing sometimes, and it really doesn't work. And in security, one size fits all is actually dangerous. So what we're promoting is that a solution should be a personalized assessment, a personalized prescription of what to do, and personalized security tools for each merchant, each site, and even each individual user. So Gabe, why don't you give us a quick glimpse of risk-directed security?
I will. Yeah, so this is the dashboard that a small business owner would come to. First thing we do is we start off with a risk score. So we scan the portfolio, our client's portfolio, and we derive a risk score for every merchant. And it's based on 3 simple pieces of data: business name, address, and a URL if we have one. So when they come to the portal, they instantly see what their risk is, and then on the right column or the right square, they have a very intuitive to-do list. So we're trying to tell them exactly how they can get from in this case, a D to an A. And that's not just like generic advice. It is intuitive based on what the merchant is doing. It updates based on actions that they are taking. On the bottom left is identity monitoring, so this is where we would, if for example, we're constantly monitoring the dark web, breach databases, social media. So if, for example, one of their employees' credentials ended up on the dark web, this is where it would appear. They would get an alert. Similarly, if somebody set up a fake business or fake social media site using their details, that's where it would appear. And on the bottom right, this is all the security updates. So if we find malware on their website, or if we stop a phishing attempt, they would get notified of it here. And then, depending on how much they want, they can drill into this and find out more details. But it's monitoring all year round. It's not as Kevin said, it's not just come in once a year and check a box. It is continuous monitoring. So we're improving this dashboard all the time. We're getting feedback all the time from different clients. So this will iterate and get better as more versions come out. Okay, Kevin, is this me?
This is you.
This is me, okay. Well, I suppose you constantly be saying that, this is not about statistics. We've all seen statistics like this, but, these are real businesses, real people that are, genuinely like 1 in 5 if they get breached, they are literally out of business. And I think as an industry, we can do way more for them. And so I think with risk-directed security, it actually gives us, for the first time, a really great opportunity to make meaningful improvements to small business security.
So let's close out with a couple of thoughts to leave you with. So we need to acknowledge the gap. And what I mean by that is the gap is that many of these small merchants today, these simple merchants, they're either not doing PCI or they're treating it as a checkbox exercise. And we need to transition to active threat defense for these merchants.
Yeah, we don't need to reinvent the wheel either. So we can actually build on the foundation of the tracks that have already been laid to these merchants through PCI compliance. The idea is we're going to try and push a better product down those existing pipes. So we don't have to start from scratch either.
And we need to focus on context. So we need to assess based on business impact and using tools like threat intelligence in order to give these merchants guidance on what they need to address first.
The product also comes with a huge amount of education for small businesses, because we want to try and equip them with better insights about their own business, and that's a really important part of risk-directed security.
And as we're going beyond the checklist, we need to just have a continuous cycle of determination of risk and then remediation of risk through similar tools to this. So the best way for us to predict the future is to invent it. Thank you.